to Justice Quest.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Justice Quest. I'm your host, Tom O'Neill, and this is the talk show, the show that we go ahead and we unapologetically call for, and I said unapologetically call for the death penalty being applied to those who violate our Constitution, our way of life. Boy, we've got an amazing stack of stuff here going all over the world. That's why we call it Friday Frenzy. We can go ahead. We don't limit our chat to one subject, but we covered a lot of them. All right. And I decided to go ahead and keep up my Deuteronomy 28:28 here to go ahead and show you, we have to come under unity in Christ, as we once were. We all had a constitution. We all believed in it. Now that constitution being torn apart by rabid dogs. Yeah, I say rabid dogs from the libtards on the left. They are seeking to go ahead and get rid of our constitution any way they can. And they are putting them into the camp of they are against God, because if we've demonstrated on this show many times already, and we've only been on the air about 2 months now. And, oh, by the way, we're on the air on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, and every week. So if I'm not going to be here one day, and I've already covered that once, I had to take a day off, or we will tell you. We will let you know. All right. And like I said, I've got several news articles here that just cover the world today. All right. And this is what madness and confusion heart was. 50 years ago, this didn't exist. We did not have people looking to perform homosexual marriages, seize guns, you name it. I mean, what's going on today is they are sitting there trying to nullify the Constitution, and I'll say it, the libtards are doing this. Patriots like myself, and I say patriots, we do right what's good for the country, all right? Not what's good for ourselves, not what's good for our agenda, right? We love this country. That's why you should be listening to this show on three times a week. All right, one of the legs of the stool at this show survives on is gun control. All right, we've got a case that the New Jersey Court of Appeals, all right, went ahead and let me just go ahead and read it. Bushcraft Base Camp is reporting on July 24th. That's today, I think. This case landed with a thud in a debate that was already shifting fast. What happened in New Jersey may not stay in New Jersey for long. Well, no kidding. As we're, all throughout the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s, they were always sitting there going ahead and saying, gun control, gun control, gun control. We need to go ahead and get these evil weapons off the street. We need blah, blah, blah. A weapon is not evil. A weapon, a hammer cannot be evil. It can be used for evil purposes, yes, but an inanimate object in itself cannot be evil. And they go ahead and they say, well, if it's got a black plastic stock, a pistol grip, detachable magazine, all these are cosmetic issues, So we go ahead and say that the one way that we can avoid becoming slaves of anybody is to go ahead and keep ourselves armed. That's the reason that was put into the Constitution of the United States. I will say this to the day I die. I don't care how many mass shootings there are. Speaking of mass shootings, let's go ahead and take a look at some of them. They don't last on the air longer because most of the mass shootings are being perpetrated by leftists. Yeah, the running joke was, you want to get a mass shooting off the air and mention that the shooter was a leftist, or a liberal. Yeah, that's what they do. They are under the influence of Satan, all right? Satan is here to rob, kill, and destroy, whatever. He's out there destroying families. He's out there through drugs, through sex, through you name it. And people are just going, Okay, but I don't want to follow Jesus, too many rules. Yeah, well, you know what? You're actually working yourself your way into a prison. All right. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is when God led Israel out of Egypt, all right, out of bondage. All right. You can look at that as he was leading them out of sin. All right. And what they did is he was ushering them into, you follow me or you follow sin. End of story. Because sin eventually is its own prison. You become an alcoholic. All right. You're addicted to alcohol. You start smoking cigarettes. You become addicted to cigarettes. You can even become addicted to love and sex. Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. So anyway, you've got freedom in Christ, or you have slavery and chains under Satan. Take your pick. That's the easiest way I can go ahead and describe it. All right. Now, getting back to our New Jersey ruling. This case landed with a thud in a debate that was already shifting fast. What happened in New Jersey may not stay in New Jersey for long. Yeah, judges are starting to go ahead and realize that, we can't go ahead and nullify the Constitution anymore. We're not going to have a Constitution to nullify. We're going to get rid of our way of life. So those that stand up for it, hey, good job. All right, now, there's a lot of bad judges out there, but I think there's a lot of good judges out there too. Federal Appeals Court just handed down one of the most consequential gun rulings in the country this year. On July 17, 2026, the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that key parts of New Jersey's assault weapons law violates the Second Amendment, according to Reuters, the Associated Press published court opinion. The court said New Jersey could not keep its ban on semi-automatic rifles like the AR-15 in the way it has been written and enforced. All right, that's kind of vague there, So there's another way it can be written and enforced, The way I read the Second Amendment is that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. What part of infringe is unclear? Arms, which part of that is unclear? All right, I think it was written very simply. The Constitution was written in a simple language that even a 5-year-old can understand it. Or anybody with a 5th grade education can understand it, I think, is the way it was written. All right. Let's see. It also reversed a lower court ruling that had allowed the state's limit on magazines holding more than 10 rounds to remain in place. That is a major step because magazine limits have often survived legal challenge even when other gun restrictions did not. All right, why have they been trying to get rid of this so long? All right, this is from a New World Order thing, and they're being directed by Satan, right? Because they know they're about to do something that we would shoot them for. Now remember, I believe that we're in the end times. And how we go through it before the rapture is up to us. We could become slaves or we could still be free men. If you want gun control, it's easy. Renounce your citizenship and move to Japan or move to Germany. If you like abortion, renounce your citizenship and move to China. They won't have you. Why? Because you're rabble rousers. If you want to get rid of Christians, yeah, great. Move to Africa. The Muslims are killing Christians over there left and right. In fact, I got an article on here somewhere about that. We'll get to that here in a little bit. Moving on, this was not a trial court decision from a single judge, but came from a federal appeals court, which gave it much more weight inside the state covered by the Third Circuit, including New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. All right, in practical terms, that means lawyers, judges, lawmakers, and governors across the country are now studying this opinion line by line. Now, I grew up in Pennsylvania. Shooting was a way of life when I was a boy, all right? I was shocked to find out recently about how far left the state of Pennsylvania has gone. I mean, Pennsylvania used to be a rifleman's paradise. Man, oh man, nobody went ahead and bothered us. You know, when we were sitting there and we had a rabbit running around the backyard eating up our crops, you know, we go ahead and take it out. Well, my aunt who lived down the neighborhood would immediately call up within 30 seconds and saying, "I heard shooting," and she was from New York City. I said, "Yeah, that was us. You know, don't worry about it." Finally, I went ahead and I told my mom. I said, "You got to do something about my aunt there." She goes, "Why?" I says, "Watch." I went out, grabbed a shotgun, went out the back door, fired it, and come back in, and I hold my hand out to the phone, and sure enough, the phone rang. All right, it says, "You answer it." So anyway, I said, I had tried to go ahead and explain to her that was just us, and that shooting is a way of life here in Pennsylvania, but she was from New York City, and you know that was just something that wasn't. And then the first year that they lived there, the line of hunters were right across from her trailer, and they were shooting deer come across there. She thought it was a war zone. There's a bunch of guys out here with guns. All right, yeah, they are. Okay. And but anyway, it took her a few years to get used to it, but she finally did. Okay. In practical terms, that means lawyers, judges, lawmakers, and governors across the country are now studying this opinion line by line. I don't see what's so difficult about this. Yeah. Why this case matters far beyond one state. The reason this ruling matters nationally is simple. New Jersey is hardly alone. According to Associated Press, that's AP, 10 states plus Washington, D.C. have laws that generally ban the manufacture, sale, or transfer of assault weapons. So a ruling against one state law immediately echoes elsewhere. This is confusion of heart, people. You know, 40, 50, 60 years ago, laws like this didn't even matter. The Sullivan Act, which was passed in 1929, and actually that was done by criminals. All right, you can read the history about Sullivan. He was looking for a way to disarm his adversaries, you know, so he could rule New York City with impunity. So he got a Democratic lawyer or mayor to agree with him, and sure enough, that's what started the gun control laws. And of course, it didn't do anything to curb crime, but that's what its stated purpose was. All right. So, you know, if something doesn't work, you get rid of it. You just don't say, "Oh, let's keep doing this because, you know, it makes us feel good," you know, or this is a reasonable approach when you're not going ahead and cracking down on the criminals. Not like they were doing in Virginia. We detailed that here in an earlier broadcast. This is confusion of heart, people. God is separating us into two camps, whether we're going to follow God or whether we're not. And I think that if you're in the not crowd, you're going to be done away with. Gun rights groups will almost certainly use the opinion in fresh lawsuits or in ongoing cases from California, Illinois to Maryland. State attorneys general defending those laws will be forced to distinguish New Jersey statutes from their own or argue that the Third Circuit got the constitutional analysis wrong. Either way, national litigations field just changed. Legal engine behind the decision to understand why this case could reshape gun laws, you have to look at the legal test driving it. The ruling is rooted in the Supreme Court's 2022 decision in New York State's Rifle and Pistol versus Bruin, which said modern gun laws must be consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulations. There was no firearm regulation until the 1920s. Firearm regulation is a relatively modern concept in the history of this country. It didn't exist for 160 years. That standard sounds tidy, but in practice has scrambled firearm laws nationwide. Yeah. That's it. Let's see. Yeah, they go into a few other things, but it's kind of things that we've covered before. What it could mean for assault weapon ban in other states, why magazine restrictions may be even more vulnerable now. And that's another thing. If we go ahead and start restricting magazines, and we're going to go ahead and start restricting barrels, we're going to go ahead and start restricting other parts, and that's unconstitutional. If you go ahead and get rid of a certain set of let's say a trigger, then you're going to go ahead and, in fact, nullify the firearm. So yeah, I know blunderbusses and flintlocks with the arm of the use in the Constitution in the 1700s. That's why they said arms. They didn't say flintlocks, they just said armed, because they knew that technology was progressing and we were going to get better and better with it. And they were concerned that the American people would not come under a tyrant. All right. Yeah. All right. From Israel 365 News. I don't know if you've heard about this or not. Initial reports said 4 Palestinians and 1 Israeli were killed in the incident. At least 6 others were wounded. Now, these youths or boys were out on a hike, all right? And they were ambushed by Hamas, and they were, Palestinians near the village mosque, all right? And I'll get to the article here. At least 6 others were wounded. And 2 of the wounded were evacuated by helicopter, 1 with a shoulder wound, conscious and in moderate condition, 1 seriously wounded in the upper body. 2 more lightly wounded were evacuated separately. According to details of the incident, the hikers had arrived near the village of Tel in the Samaria Regional Brigade's area and were attacked by Palestinians near the village mosque. The Havat Gilad security officer rushed to the scene, and a group of Palestinians stole his weapon and shot 1 of the hikers with it. The IDF imposed a closure on the village of Tel and on Nablus following the attack. Journalist Alicia Ured wrote on social media that, based on the hikers' own accounts, it was a village sheikh of Tel who seized the weapon and carried out the shooting. Though the claim has not been officially confirmed, Yared added that the entire village had gathered in the area near Gilad, where his IDF forces conducted a painstaking search for the weapon. Yisrael Gantz, head of the Binyamin Regional Council and chairman of the Yesha Council, said the attack reflected a coordinated campaign rather than an isolated event. The area is burning literally and figuratively, Gantz said. The wave of arson, attempted attacks, and ongoing incitements by the Palestinian Authority are all part of a single campaign aimed at harming the settlements and the citizens of Israel. These are not isolated incidents, but rather planned and continued terror. Friday's shooting followed 2 separate attacks a day earlier. In the first, a civilian was seriously wounded near the settlement of Elon Mora while trying to extinguish a fire close to the direct Avraham farming outpost. The victims, identified as Itamar Cohen, 51, one of the founders of the agricultural farm enterprise, had gone to the fire to help put it out. A clash broke out between the Israelis and Palestinians at the scene, during which 2 Palestinian assailants grabbed Cohen in the chest before another stabbed Cohen in the chest before another civilian present identified the attack and eliminated the 2 terrorists, the IDF said. Magen David Adam, the medics treated Cohen, who was airlifted by the Israeli Air Force's Unit 669 for further treatment. You know, this is ongoing in the Middle East, and people have gone ahead and turned a blind eye to Israel. You know, and they are just trying to survive in an area. They're surrounded by Muslim countries, and they're the only democracy in Israel. And I say a democracy because I don't know what form of government they have, but I think it's more like a republic, but I'll have to look into that. But this brings me up another point. On Wednesday, I went ahead and I said that, you know, God gave us rules for warfare, all right? And that's contained in Deuteronomy 20, laws of warfare, all right? Torture is not prohibited by God, all right? You read it for yourself. It's about a 5-6 minute read. But I don't care what happened on October 7th. Israel was attacked. End of story, end of argument. The relief that was sent into the Palestinians were blocked by the Palestinian Authority, all right, not Israel. And yet Israel got the blame from the world press. This is why I don't go ahead and believe the press anymore. They tell you what you want, they want you to hear. End of story. You know, go ahead and frame it any way you want to. Oh boy, I'm going to tell you what. Now we're going to kind of go ahead and get, you know, further on into the world, you know, into Ukraine. Which, you know, there was a big argument on Facebook between me and somebody else, and guy come out there and said that he stood for Ukraine. And I says, yeah, how do you know? How do you know what's actually going on there? And he kind of admitted, yeah, well, I don't. I said, well, how can you take sides? Now, I'm Ukrainian, half Ukrainian by birth, so I should be, you know, I should be pro-Ukrainian, but I'm not. You know, I don't know exactly what's going on there. Yeah, but anyway. But I do know we're soaking a lot of money in there that we don't. And this article here goes ahead and proves it, that we don't need to. All right. And I'm going to tell you why. Although the Trump administration, this is reported by Judicial Watch. And they're talking about, despite rampant fraud in Ukraine's HIV program, the U.S. gives Kiev $10 million to combat the STD. Really? Although the Trump administration plans to drastically slash funding of HIV programs in the United States in the coming year, it's allocating $10 million to combat the sexually transmitted disease in Ukraine, which already gets an exorbitant amount of aid from American taxpayers. So they're packing on another $10 million of what we're already given them. Congress has allocated an astounding $195 billion in spending to the war in Ukraine, and though most of it goes to military, because a big chunk has gone to humanitarian projects rife with corruption, Judicial Watch launched an investigation after a federal audit exposed fraud in the government's extensive Ukrainian humanitarian aid initiative, and last year sued the notoriously corrupt State Department offshoot known as U.S. Aid that disbursed some $35 billion in aid to the former Soviet republic since the Russian invasion in 2022. Some of that money went to failed HIV programs in Ukraine that were later involved in criminal activity, a point of concern that should stop the flow of U.S. taxpayer dollars. No kidding. This is what happens when we don't follow God's word. All right, this is why God gave us marriage, so that we could go ahead and sexually satisfy one another in marriage. End of story. Proverbs goes ahead and states that draw water from your own cisterns. In other words, you know, pay attention to your wife, right? That's what she's there for. Not only, but, you know, but that's part of it. And you are there for her. If you don't, another man will. With fancy talk. Yeah. That's it. Generous country as well. Let's see, received Ukrainian. Okay, Judicial Watch exposed one of the fraudulent Ukrainian HIV charities that received tens of millions of dollars from Uncle Sam to well-generous contributions from left-wing billionaire George Soros. It was known as 100% Life, and its purported mission was to fight for the life of people living with HIV in Ukraine's 25 regions. You know what? When you sit there and knowingly stick your arm into a meat grinder and it gets chopped off, you don't expect me to, and then go around crying that you got your arm chopped off. Well, you know what? You did it yourself. Sorry about that. But you know what? We don't need to be spending money on this nonsense when it's simple abstinence. If the men go ahead and keep it in your pants, and the women, the best birth control is aspirin between your knees. Hold it there. Keep your knees shut. Oh boy. Wow. And this is another thing we're going to get onto is, and I'm not going to forget about this, is the Epstein files. Let's go ahead and see them. Let's go and bring them out into the open. Let's get this over with. And why is when every time we go ahead and bring it up to our senators and Congress, we just hear cheep, cheep, cheep crickets chirping? Yeah, nothing. Because they 51% chance that they're on it, Oh boy, or else they wouldn't be there. They're already compromised. They're being blackmailed. As we've gone ahead and said this was all a CIA, Mossad plan to go ahead and compromise anybody in politics, influential in politics. And it's happened all over the world. We have world leaders going to Epstein's Island. What do you think the reasoning for that was? I'm going to let you answer that. I've already come up with my reasoning for it, and I think that's what it is. Now, we all heard about moving on Judicial Watch. And the funny thing about it is nobody's going to jail over this. We have one politician in the UK that's been thrown in jail. One. And I don't know how he got chosen out. How about all these senators who are signing off on these bills to send, billions of dollars overseas and with no accountability, as we just read in the HIV story? Shut it all down. I don't know who is responsible for this, but shut it all down. Shut it all down. Anything going overseas, shut it down. Go ahead. The only things we fund is the military, the court system, which includes prisons. The post office got to be self-funding and roads. That's it. But in order to go ahead and get elected, these people got to promise more. Why do you think all these, we've got mile marker signs on the highway. Now they're mile marker at 194.1, 194.2, 194.3, 194.5. Yeah. And then all of a sudden in the Obama years, we had all these yellow things that every crosswalk put in. Yeah, even in Michigan, North Dakota. Yeah. That really? Come on now. First time a sidewalk cleaner goes over, it rips off all those, little yellow things that you're supposed to keep your foot on there. And you're left with, basically smooth plastic. Oh man, I'll tell you what, we need to go ahead and get rid of the waste in our government, people. And we've got to go ahead and jail these senators and congressmen that got their hands in the Social Security that are getting it. Insider trading is going to stop. However, they're worth millions of dollars on a position that only pays them $175,000 a year. Come on, what else do you say? When I was a young airman, I was on a classified mission. How can I put this without? And I had to go ahead and show them how it actually works, and so that they could go ahead and make their system work with it. And I actually got a letter of accommodation for it, and I said, you know what, this is, they were teaching me how to use it, and every base I went to, I was the expert in this one system. And because I was there at its creation, so we finally went ahead and got it. And I kind of mentioned it with my shop chief standing right there as we were kind of going over something. And I said, this sounds like a pretty good company to invest in. And he looks at me and he says, you do that and I will have you court-martialed for insider trading. I says, what about it? What is that? And he says, you have knowledge that the general public doesn't. I'm like, okay. Come to find out years later that Congress is doing the exact same thing. They see a bill coming up there and they say, it's a good idea. Let's go and invest in this company. All right, yeah. And then they vote for it. Yep. Yeah. That's how, Nancy Pelosi's, worth, however houndreds of millions of dollars she's worth, Which I guess she's in trouble. Her husband's in trouble now for committing a hit and run, I guess. Yeah, well, who knows about that? And we've got to go ahead and whenever we have public money being awarded to other countries, corruption is rife. Corruption is commonplace. Everybody's lining up to get their, quote, free money. That money is by the taxpayers. It's about time we as taxpayers start demanding before they come back and ask for more money for taxes, where the money that we already sent you is going. Here in North Dakota, and I demonstrated this, we've got income tax, property tax, sales tax. My stance is get rid of two of them, keep one, and you live on that. End of story. We just got the Teddy Roosevelt presidential library put down in the Badlands out in the middle of nowhere. And now I heard a rumor that they're going to be coming back and asking the state of North Dakota for maintenance funding. No, you built it on, you maintain it on donations. I didn't want it in the first place. $39 trillion in debt, people. That's where we're standing at now. In fact, I don't even know where it's still at. I don't even know if we broke 40 million yet. We probably did. But you know what? 13 trillion of that was added by Obama. We went from 13 trillion to 26 trillion. That's 13 trillions of difference. How is that? Because all the Muslims that he brought in this country are now living on welfare. They're living in apartments that are being funded by the United States government, our tax dollars. And they are sitting there. We've got a report on that too. We'll get to that here in a little bit. All right, one of the things that we've gone ahead and talked that's been in the news a couple 3 weeks ago, is about the Southern Poverty Law Center. Judicial Watch went ahead and 724 went ahead and said, in a flagrant example of government waste, a radical left-wing group that slanders conservative organization in an interactive hate map has received millions of taxpayer dollars to spread its hateful message and materials across the United States, including public schools. Yeah, I'm going to stop right there. The Southern Poverty Law Center, along with Missouri Information and Analysis Center, went ahead and labeled, at the early part of the Obama years, that, along with the FBI office in Phoenix, I might add, gone ahead and labeled that Christians, gun owners, people who store food for more than a week, et cetera, are domestic terrorists. Yeah, domestic terrorists. Well, how is that possible? Well, I told you that early on in this program, in the very first episode, first or second episode of this, and we've been on the air about 2 months now, that the American government has declared war on the average American citizen. That's you and me, people. And frankly, I got fed up with it. This is where my tax dollars are going. Another thing on that we'll cover in another broadcast. Nearly $4 million in taxpayer funds have gone to the Southern Poverty Law Center, an extremist Alabama-based nonprofit dedicated to racial justice in the last decade alone, according to an alarming report issued by Open the Books, a Florida-based group that runs a vast database of public spending for all to see. Money came from states, cities, counties, universities, school districts, and other public entities to help fulfill the SPLC's stated mission of dismantling white supremacy. What is white supremacy? Come on now. That's like illegal guns. Define for me an illegal gun. There isn't one. There are illegal politicians that are labeling guns illegal. Yeah, but, what's white supremacy? I'm not going for that a bit. And creating a world where Black and brown communities are represented and respected by our democracy. We're not a democracy. We are a republic. If you want to become a democracy, move over to another country that is a democracy. Let's say India. They're a democracy. Democracy is mob rule. What 51% of the voters want, that's what happens. We're a rule of law. We are a republic. And I'm going to hammer at that big time. Since 2016, the SPLC has received $3.85 million to help spread its teaching materials in America's public school classrooms. The recently published report confirms. Oh boy, so not only do we have the Department of Education tearing apart our public school, now we got the Southern Poverty Law Center. Yeah, this is white men are evil, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, here we go. Go ahead and take a look at some of the statistics. You'll see where the evil lies. How about the Somali immigrants that are forming gangs down in Minnesota? We're going to cover that here later. How about the Black Lives Matter? Those were people who are pretty evil. They're the ones overturning cars, committing riots, and burning down cities. Not white people. They're out there for racial justice. What they mean by racial justice, just like until we're out there for justice and then we become the majority, then we're going to become the tyrants. That's what they mean. That's the way dictators work all over the world. That's the way the Muslims are working it. They're wanting justice and they're wanting to, and we've got this coming up here. We're going to go ahead and cover some other things. Again, from Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch announced today that it forced the release of 8 pages of documents from the Office of Director of National Intelligence in a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit that shows that an ODNI task force stated that the intelligence community identified election system vulnerabilities that could be exploited by U.S. adversaries and withheld information about those vulnerabilities from the American people. Yeah. Now, when the election machines started coming out, they were supposed to be all electronic and they were supposed to be secure and everything else. I says, yeah, right. If You had people hacking electronic slot machines in Vegas and doing it very, very well too. First thing they do, these slot machine hackers do, they go ahead and they buy these machines and they figured it out. Now, you're going to tell me that our Director of National Intelligence knew about these. I sat there and watching on Facebook some guy that went ahead and flipped election results on one of these supposedly unbreakable, secure election machines in less than 2 minutes. All the while, he's with 2 keystrokes. I'm sorry, not 2 minutes, 2 keystrokes. Yeah. I'm not naive enough to know that anything electronic can be broken into. That's why I am against that these cars, autonomous driving cars, because they could be hacked, they could cause a lot of mayhem out there. And I'm going to make this prediction that they will. When these first came out, I was against them. Paper ballots only, hand count them. The DIG, Director of Initiatives Group, has uncovered indications of bias and politicization within the intelligence community's election security assessment. Specifically, the DIG has uncovered indications that the intelligence community redacted and had identified election system vulnerabilities that could be exploited by our adversaries and proceeded to withhold this information from the American people. Yeah. So in other words, everybody knew about it except the American people. Congress knew about it, yet where's the indignation? Yeah. the Democrats, the only way that they could win is by stealing elections. Most of us people out here, they have a great way of making us feel like we are alone. All right. We are not alone, people. We need to stand up as one and say enough's enough. We're going to hang you. We have got to go ahead and restore order to our republic, or it's going to be gone forever. We are being attacked by too many enemies from within. And in many cases, we brought in the enemy. Hint, hint, the Muslims. Bridget Gabrielle has been warning about this for 25, 26 years that I know of. Wow. We go on and on and on. The DIG is supporting ongoing DOJ investigation with a nexus to election security and interference. I don't see what's so hard about this. If you have a guy on stage showing an audience on how easy it is, that should be a slam dunk case. When the charge of fraud was going on about the 2016 election or the 2020 election, and somebody suggested that they go ahead and seize one of the Dominion voting machines to go ahead and have it gone through forensically. Dominion come out and says, if you do that, we will sue you. Well, we never heard anything about that after that. DIG inquiries will continue to conduct a proper hands-off and or criminal referral to DOJ via our FBI detailee. Well, you're getting 2 incompetent agencies, the DOJ and the FBI. They will do whatever the Democrats tell them to do. It does not appear Dominion, and I mentioned that name, has a good excuse for what happened. We want to get our hands on the machine before potential evidence is erased. I feel this may be our best opportunity to document how election rigging is occurring, and that and then use that signature to walk back through IC records to search for the same fingerprints. In March 2025, President Trump issued an executive order that included a directive to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to review the security of electronic voting systems. Wow. You know what? I hope this investigation goes somewhere. And I hope that whoever's responsible in the DNC goes ahead and goes to prison for the rest of their lives or gets hung. End of story. Mr. President, I have gone ahead and I told you that if you need a hangman, I will gladly go ahead and build a gallows in front of the DOJ, and I will go ahead and do it. We need to go ahead and get control of these lawbreakers. No crimes are being committed. DOJ and FBI are investigating. The investigation goes nowhere, or it's excused, i.e., no reasonable prosecutor will investigate, would prosecute Hillary Clinton. Yeah, there you go. There you have it. And I looked at the radio and I heard that, and I said, well, I'll be the unreasonable prosecutor. I'll go ahead and do it. And the least we could have got her was destruction of evidence. End of story. We know she did that. Oh, boy. We've got so many intelligence leaks going on in our government, it's no wonder. And as I've said on this before, I heard from another show there that, a lot of countries out there are preparing up their own plans. Contingency plans are being updated on a weekly basis for when America falls. Not if, but when America falls. In other news, Fox News is reporting that the Secret Service is coming out of the closet now and saying that Joe Biden got lost in his own closet in the White House. I think that's funny. Yeah, Republicans were outraged. That last is mine, but, I found it funny that, the Republicans were outraged that they were kept in the dark about the condition of Joe Biden. I mean, really? Come on now. Oh, boy. We've got to go ahead and bring law and order back into this country, and it starts from the top down. In other news, Christian genocide, Nigeria, Sudan, Pakistan, Armenia, and Syria are hotspots. These are where Muslims are killing Christians. And they're doing that, and we hear crickets coming from the press. Why? Because the press is controlled by Satan, all right? And Satan knows his time is short, so he's going out there roaring around like a lion seeking whom he may destroy. Misery loves company. He knows he's going to be chained into hell for the rest of eternity. But while that's going on, Massachusetts, all right, get this. Massachusetts, one of the states where freedom in this country began, has gone ahead and did a complete flip-flop in the last 50 years. Senate Bill S-2134 guarantees Muslims will be appointed and hired across all levels of government. And what this is doing is ending the separation of church and state in favor of Islam. You gotta be, oh man. Everybody from the governor on down to the senators and representatives who voted for this bill ought to be taken out and hung. And I'm going to tell you what, we cannot go ahead and appoint and hire people who are out here to destroy this country. I mean, how can I put this to where even you libtards can understand it? I mean, even then you won't, but I'm going to try anyway. Why would you hire somebody who hates dogs to go ahead and walk your dog? Why? All right, let's put that in context. Why would you hire somebody who hates this country into positions to run this country? They're out there to destroy this country. And I'm going to stand here till the day I die, till that door is being broken down by armed thugs going ahead and looking for my head. Because you know what? Let them bring it on. Every, and I say every prophet in the Old Testament and Jesus himself was destroyed by the powers that be because they didn't want their authority challenged. They wanted to stay in power. Even though he wasn't looking to replace them. They were just saying repent. You know, and a little bit news closer to home. The Somali youth gang violence has surged in Minnesota. Yeah. What is that? What is up with that? You know what? If they are going ahead and have these Somali youth gangs, get rid of them. Get rid of them. Get them all thrown back to Somalia. Every Muslim in this country who still professes to be a Muslim, go ahead and get them back out of this country. End of story. Bulldoze the mosques down. We don't need them here in this country. This is God's country. He founded it, and this was supposed to be a shining light on a beacon. We need Americans to stand up for America. And a lot of Americans are doing that. And I stand proudly with them. You know, and this thing about hyphenated Americans, oh, I'm an African American, or I'm an Irish American, or we don't need any hyphenated Americans. You're either American first and foremost, or you're not. If you're a hyphenated American, get lost. I'm proud of my Irish heritage, but yeah, you know what? I'm not an Irish American. I am an American, period. God's word stresses unity in 1 Peter 3:8. And that's what we need to do, is we need to become one mind again. One mind united under Christ. If we don't do this, and this is where religion politics goes ahead and gets a thing. This was a bad decision by the Supreme Court, where they said that, separation of church and state. Yeah, that's why they could, we had to go ahead and file for 501c3. Why is that? One of the chains, and I say, and they call it a string attached, I call it a chain, says that we can no longer talk politics from the pulpit. Thank God President Trump went ahead and reversed that policy. Yeah, that's when it was the church's job to go ahead and become an integral part of our politics in our early part of our nation's history. Every politician who ran for public office had to produce a letter from his church stating he was a member in good standing. We need to get back to that. We need to get back to that. I went ahead and when I was running for the United States Senate, I was the only, between me and Kramer, I was the only one who said I was a Christian. I knew what I was talking about. I knew the difference between right and wrong. That's why when I called Kramer on his radio talk show and volunteered to become the director of the DOJ, I says, I'll bring something to the DOJ and FBI that's something that hasn't been seen in a while. It's called justice, because I know the difference between right and wrong. I would have cleaned house. In fact, I'm hoping I still get the chance. We're coming up on an hour here, people, and I promise you guys I'll go ahead and keep these things to about an hour long. But when we go ahead, and I want to leave you with this final note, and this is a note that I've repeated on many broadcasts. If we go ahead and we stray away from God's word, we get off our knees and we just go ahead and treat every day as another day, and we let corruption go unanswered, corruption go unchallenged. When we don't go ahead and clamp down on evil and clamp down hard, evil is encouraged by that. Yeah, well, one liberal libtard went ahead and posted a thing on Facebook. Do you want to go ahead and hang a rebellious son? I went, oh yeah, I do. Because how many more kids would go ahead and see that and say they could get away with it too, and throw off the yoke of a quote oppression of their parents. If we don't go ahead and destroy the criminals and hang them, all right, shoot them, whatever, that's going to encourage more criminal activity. And we can see that. Minneapolis was one of the ones that was burned down in 2016, and after Trump was elected to the first term, he went back to the Trump and asked the feds for $500 million and to repair the damages caused by the looters. No, you paid for it yourself. You went ahead and let this happen. Pay for it yourself. This is the reason for this program called Justice Quest. It's a quest for justice, justice that hasn't been seen in many, many years. We got Bill and Hillary going in and committing crimes from the day they were in the presidency, and they've never been held accountable. Oh yeah, they get investigated, and then they say, oh yeah, well, nothing really happened here, move on, blah, blah, blah. And, well, we got these $1 million investigations going on, costing us taxpayers millions and millions of dollars, and nobody ever gets prosecuted. Well, I say it's about time to flip that around. It's about time we go ahead and we start, oh yeah, you cross the line here, you're automatic. End of story. We don't need no jury. We don't need, well, I'm not saying get rid of judge and juries, all right, but upon conviction, give them the hanging. And we won't go ahead and we will call in people from around the country so we get an unbiased opinion from all walks of life. So we have millions and millions of taxpayer dollars. We have the federal government that's gone ahead and declared war on the average United States citizen and doing nothing about it. You've got examples, ATF killing families for over a guy cutting off a shotgun barrel too short. And that was a setup, Ruby Ridge. And you got David Koresh at Waco, over supposedly illegal firearms. And they never looked for illegal firearms. They bulldozed the site over the next day, and it's still roped off. Yeah, well, I'll go down there and start digging for some of those illegal weapons. Then you have stupid people coming out there and saying that there's no reason anybody needs a pistol that shoots 32 rounds per second. Yeah, well, you know what? That's already controlled under the destructive devices clause for the ATF. You've got to have a Class 3 federal firearms license to go ahead and own one of those things. It's a simple piece of sheet metal, and that costs $15,000. So that's pretty much about it. I shot one of those too. I wouldn't want one, but yeah, they're a little fun. But you see where I'm going at. Then we had the Bundy standoff, the Bundy Ranch standoff. I kind of went through that here a little bit a couple of days ago. That was unbelievable. And then there was a time, the BLM went ahead and fenced off this watering hole from this rancher. Yeah, that was on his side, but the court decided to do nothing. He had a weak judge who asked the guy and says, you really want me to go ahead and rule against the federal government? And yeah, that's your job in this case, but nothing was ever done. And that's what I'm getting sick and tired of seeing is, if we commit a crime against the government, we're hauled in the prison and thrown in the prison for 20 years, okay? Yet, if they commit a crime, oh well, yep, so be it. They got caught. All right, that's the way it is. You can't fight City Hall. You know who come up with that saying? City Hall. They're gonna. In other words, what they're saying is we're gonna do what we want when we want to do it. And you can't do anything about it. All right. That's why they come up with the saying that all politicians are inherently crooked. Yeah, that's why. That's what we expect. We expect them to be crooked. You get a guy actually coming up there and trying to do some good, and he's kind of, we don't want to see this. Oh, but I am getting sick and tired of all the blindsidedness going on in the Department of Justice. It's about time they start doing their job. That's what we are paying them for. And Congress, you better sit up and do things right and obey the Constitution. Unbelievable. I don't know about you people, but I'm getting sick and tired of all the shenanigans going on. Hence the formation of this show. Well, everybody have a good weekend, and we will see you on Monday, bright and early, and for another exciting episode of Justice Quest. Yeah, if you like what you hear, go ahead and go to our website, justicequestlive.com. Scroll down and donate now and follow. So with that, I'll go ahead and say goodbye, everybody, and you have a good day and a pleasant weekend. All right. We shall talk to you later. Bye.